Hello, everyone. Welcome back for this new episode of Coding Design System. Today, I'll be your host, and we've got not one but two guests today, with Anthony and Mike coming to talk with me about Ionic and Stencil. Hey, Anthony, how are you?
I'm great, Mads. Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, really. And Mike, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thanks for having us. I'm looking forward to this.
So we said just before starting the stream that you are currently traveling to Amsterdam for a conference. That's it.
Yeah, I'm in Amsterdam for the week for JS World and View Amsterdam. Uh, Excited to be doing fun that I get to do a podcast or stream while being on the road.
Great challenge, So enjoy the weather. It's fun because I guess that's maybe half the team of engineers at Dev Riots are based in Amsterdam, including our CEO. So you're not that far from them. So yeah, perfect time for this stream.
Maybe I'll run into him during this week, and I was like, well, "Hey, I was just on your stream. You should Matt did a hell of a job."
Perfect time. So, Anthony, thank you also for being with us. We're going to talk more specifically about Stencil and how we can use it to build a design system and to build the components foundation of your design system. You're currently the developer working on developer relations for Stencil. That's it. Could you
Right,
just
that's exactly right.
yeah? Could you just give us more information about it, who you are and what you are doing?
Definitely. Yeah, so you're exactly right. I'm the developer advocate at Ionic for Stencil specifically. I came on a little less than a year ago. Before coming to Ionic, I was working as a front developer, just working on building design systems, and really enjoyed that and everything that that world had to offer. But I think over time, I just developed a real passion for education and teaching, and getting to talk to people and do things like this and interact with the community a bit more. So yeah, so for the past year, I've been talking about Stencil and teaching people about how to use it. And it's been really great. I get to do exciting things like this and share Stencil with the community. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So
Awesome. So let's talk about it, and let's teach people about web components and how we can
yeah,
get the better of it when working on foundation stuff like design system and so on. I've got a first question for you. So what is right now your favorite features in Stencil, and especially when you want to work on the design systems more specifically? But what's your favorite features in Stencil right now?
yeah. So I might backtrack a little bit here just to give some context as to why I like some of these things about Stencil. So for those in the audience who don't know, Stencil is a web components compiler that offers a lot of kind of niceties, I guess, and features that make writing web components a bit more familiar. I think in the front end world, we've gotten spoiled a bit by all of our nice front end frameworks that have all these abstractions and nice, easy ways to write our code. And so what Stencil does is take some of those abstractions and features that we know and love, but still allows us to build web components with it, which otherwise might be a little bit more cumbersome. So things that I like about the Stencil syntax, first and foremost, is JSX. I come from a React background, so picking up Stencil was really easy because of that. It was super familiar, and it's just in my opinion, a simpler syntax when it comes to templating our components. Also, things like decorators, which might be more familiar to the Angular crowd, um, but again, just another way to add features really easily to our components. And then there's a whole host of things that Stencil offers in terms of the design system world, things like auto-generated documentation based on your properties and attributes and styles and everything that you would include in your components. And then um, I think one of the biggest things that Stencil offers is our framework wrappers. So as you know, web components kind of have this promise of being a way to write components that you can place in any application, any front-end framework. And while that sounds all well and good, unfortunately, it's not quite the truth. It's not quite that easy. There are a lot of nuances and complications that come with each different framework, depending on how you're using your web components. So what Stencil does is wraps your components in a framework-specific way, so you can still write your components one time with Stencil, but then wrap them for whatever use case you might see them used in. And I could go on, but those are just a few that come to mind.
Yeah, so the idea is that you can easily distribute different kind of components in an agnostic way that could be compatible with different kind of front-end frameworks, whether it is React or Vue or Svelte or Angular or whatever, just because
Exactly.
it's based on standard, web standard, and so it should be compatible with any kind of front-end framework.
Exactly.
I've got a question for you, Mike. You're more specifically a developer advocate for Angular and at Ionic, and so Stencil is developed by Ionic. Am I right?
Yeah, so first off, I'm a huge fan of Angular. I'm not specifically focused on Angular in my day-to-day role. Yeah, Stencil is just something we built, not in terms to compete with Angular or React or Vue or any of these frameworks, but more as like a tool to help enhance where these frameworks kind of lack. And not lack in negative terms, just their focus is in something completely different than what we're trying to focus on. Like they're great at building these big picture kind of applications that are built up of hundreds of components, and we're here trying to say, all right, not every team or even company is like set on a single tech stack. How can we enable developers who like Angular, developers who like Vue, React, or no framework? How can we develop a tool that will help them work with a consistent UI pattern and consistent component API across all of these tools without having to completely re-engineer it? So yeah, it's kind of how it fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah. Okay. So having the idea that you can split the responsibilities between the logic core in the Angular application and the let's say front-end fundamentals and basic blocks dedicated to Stencil, so you could build them using web components and reuse them in the final application, handling all your business logic and so on. And
Yeah, I would kind of push that even further and like really like dial down what the focus is. And if you're familiar with Atomic Design by Brad Frost, I would like to think of these as being the atomic components that we are building. Stencil is solely focused on making sure that you have that lowest level building block, but when you go to build the actual application, they might your day-to-day components in that higher abstraction might require 4 5 stencil components that are all composed together, and that process should feel pretty natural.
yeah, exactly. Let me use this for a little announcement. We were supposed to have Brad Frost on stream last week, but we postponed it to the last week of June. So June 28th, Brad Frost will be with us. That's all. So
Don't miss that one. That's going to be a great one, folks.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, I hope so. But yeah, definitely talking with the pop of atomic design and design system. what could be better? I'm really excited for this one. Okay, great. So that's interesting because this is exactly the responsibility of a design system. So just pushing outside of the final application the responsibility of building the front end and so on. So this is exactly why Stencil is, for me, a really good candidate as a framework to build those fundamentals kinds of elements. But when talking to design system, we often start to talk by design tokens. So What are your recommendations to handle the different kind of design tokens that you could have in Stencil or with Stencil component, and how to cascade it through the different kinds of element to your final application?
Yeah. So I think this is like a really core feature of, like you said, design systems, and Stencil is really aware of it, has kind of created a system for doing exactly this. And I know we're on the docs page now, and if you move over to, it should be under components, and then styling, I think is the title of it,
Styling it
towards the
is,
bottom there.
yes.
Yeah. So the biggest thing with Stencil is that we're building web components, so we're going to be using the Shadow DOM. And when it comes to using the Shadow DOM, we find that CSS custom properties, CSS variables, whatever you want to call them, are kind of the best way to go because they're able to penetrate through the Shadow DOM. Um, so by using custom properties, you can create layers of your tokens. So be it your kind of base tokens, and then maybe if you have semantic tokens, and then finally all the way to your component tokens. So the way you would handle this in a Stencil project is you would have one kind of global style sheet that could import from other style sheets, or you could just have all of your CSS in that sheet itself. But essentially, you define all of your tokens in that global style sheet, and then because they're using CSS custom properties, you can pull them in to your components. And so if each of your components has their own style sheet, they can define for themselves their component tokens and then connect those back to the tokens that you've defined in your global style sheet.
That's really smart. I really love it. This notion of cascading the tokens, preparing the use of the token with just, some kind of default values, and then applying them directly from the final application, and cascading it through the different kind of element to the basic foundation elements at last. This is
Exactly.
this is really, really powerful, and probably not understood enough when working on a complex design system. We're gonna try to cover it a little bit in Backlight just after that. But I have another question just before we dig into the code. So, is there some kind of specific architecture that you recommend when working on a set of design system oriented components based on Stencil? What is your experience about this one? Because we're a little bit opinionated in Backlight, but there's a lot of things that we could be inspired by. So
Yeah. So I think it really is a matter of taste, and I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all kind of architectural system when using Stencil. But I think one of the things that Stencil kind of lends itself to, and something we've seen in a lot of instances where people are using Stencil in real world applications and design systems, is a monorepo structure. And the reason being is because, like I talked about before, Stencil provides these framework wrappers. So the architecture kind of exists where Stencil is your core, and you define all of your components with Stencil. Those are your core components. And then from there, you can have other packages, a React component library, an Angular component library, so on and so forth. And each of those pull from that core that you have, and then just wrap it with whatever they need for that specific framework. So I think that's probably one thing that might be a bit more unique to Stencil because of those wrappers. But like I said, for all other aspects in terms of your tokens or the components themselves, it's really a matter of preference and what organizational structure you find most useful.
I like to sum it up as we don't have an opinion, but you should probably have an opinion on how things are done, and your team should agree on that.
yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you, because this is not an easy question. Recently we have a debate about should we distribute any kind of components in a design system in their very own packages, or in a global packages with a global versioning for all the library, or with different version for each components. So you will have to handle the different parts, like the dependencies, because the button is compatible with this dropdown, but not this version of the dropdown, and so on. So the final word of this debate was we don't have the answer. Maybe it's good for you to have just a mono repo with every component is a package and everything is just shipped at once with just a single version. But maybe for another project, it will be easier for you to maintain different kind of small packages, each one for a component. And we really don't have the answer for this one. So yeah, I totally agree with you. We don't have an opinion, but you probably have an opinion. So stick with your one.
As like the go-to DevRel answer for anything, it depends. If your team is like at the point where it's like, yeah, we don't really have a need for this or any kind of like strong opinions or strong tooling, that's totally fine. And it's okay to also not have an answer of like, what should we do in this situation? It's like, I don't know, totally valid.
I really love this one, Really, it depends. It depends. And for the last 20 years, it always depends. This is always the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
I think too,
yeah.
I was just going to say as a quick add-on, I think too, in those instances where you're not sure, I always recommend going to look at how someone else did it. Right. I think so. The Ionic framework, for example, is built with Stencil. It's a huge component library of different components built with Stencil. And so anytime that I'm building a component or trying something new, right, like go and check out how Ionic did it or how some other company did it that's using Stencil. Because chances are you can at least learn something from them, if not, replicating what they do.
Or check out this amazing blog post from this unknown author.
Do you know this guy?
I hear he's super knowledgeable.
Is there any project that you know that is using Stencil as a core foundation that you really love? Like I don't know, a really good example of best practices or something like this.
Definitely. So obviously we're going to recommend Ionic, but we're not the only ones who are using Stencil, obviously. Tons of companies from Amazon to Apple Music to Visa are using Stencil. Also, I don't know if I can shoot you a link, but example of design systems from companies that are open source. So you can go and check them out. One of them that I like is called Liquid Oxygen, which is a cool name too. So I can find a link to it. But this is from the folks at Merck. This is their and it's really well done. It's not overly complex. A really great one to learn from.
I choose to show you the starter of the Stencil starter kit that we begin to work on during this last stream. So the idea is to use Stencil to build our components directly into a design system, into Backlight, and to be able to distribute it after that in the shape of web components directly for the final use to the apps developers. So the idea was to start with defining some kind of few tokens, like defining colors tokens. And to do so, I just created a package named colors, and in the colors package, I created a colors.css file. And this colors.css file is directly responsible of declaring the different tokens in the form of CSS custom properties ready to be used inside your final Stencil components. So we did something really, really, really quick and a little bit dirty, but yeah, we defined some kind of raw tokens coming directly from the design, like a color red token mapped to the red color green, color dark, color light, those kind of stuff. And to have something that will be easier to use in our final application, we mapped those different tokens, those different design token values, into something that could be really used semantically into the different parts of the application. So we mapped a color in a color primary token, which is in this very simple example, color red, token, and same thing for a secondary color with a color green token. And that's all. More on the other files after that. To be sure that those values can be used inside the stencil components, I added a simple file using the stories.preview.js to import. Let me just comment this one just here, to import the different tokens into my different stories. Because when you're defining your tokens for your application, you will probably use the different CSS custom properties in a single file, use it once, and then import them globally into your application at the top level of your application. So every parts of your application, every components will be able to use those different kinds of tokens directly. So let's talk about a simple component like a button, the canonical button example in design system, you know. So we did a simple component using Stencil. Let me just close the panel on the left side. So to do so, we just imported some primitives from the Stencil core package, which indicate to the application to use the Stencil compiler to produce the final components. So I declared just a simple component using a decorator, the @component decorator. So I expose a simple web component element named myButton with a tag. I import a CSS dedicated to this component with a simple CSS file import. And I enable the shadow mode to be able to manipulate the different elements. And I just declare a property, which is a variant, to be able to declare a primary or a secondary or no variant at all on my button, which leads to a neutral version and a primary version and a secondary version. So I have all of these different kind of variants of my button, and I'm able to just, choose them by just declaring a variance. If I have a look at the stories for my button, I just declare a simple use of my button web component, which is really handy and really simple to do so, because this is just an extension of the HTML element. So you could be, you are able to use any kind of component element directly into your final application. So I'm using my button to produce a button, and I also have two different stories, like a button primary and a button secondary, using the variant properties applied to my component directly. So I've got a neutral version of my button, primary and secondary version. So the primary is using the primary color, and the secondary is using the secondary colors. So to do so, we are just using a class mapping using a simple ternary operator. So in my host tag, which is wrapper in the stencil component, I'm declaring a class on my top level element, and this class is mapped to primary or secondary regarding on the state of the variant property. So if the variant is primary, I enable the primary class, and so on. And I just declare a button inside it with a slot to be able to just inject the contents of my element inside my button. So if I do this without importing my CSS, I just have simple buttons that are not styled at all. So I need my styles. To have my styles, I import my CSS custom, my CSS file dedicated to this component, which is the button.css file. And so let me just comment this one right now. So if I do so, I'm just declaring a simple set of rules in CSS dedicated to my button inside my component. So my button will have a background color, which is mapped to the button color surface token. Same thing for the button color text token, with a fallback value mapped to light gray or black, depending of the background color of the color by itself. And few elements like no border, a pierced shape, and padding, internal padding. So if I have something like that, my button is exactly the same without any kind of regardless of the variant declared on the component. Why? Because this variant is mapped to class on my host. So the host is the wrapper of my component in the web component specification. So I need to target the specific class on my host. So to do so, I'm just declaring two set of rules, additional set of rules, like a host, a colon host, which is a pseudo selector in CSS targeting the host element. So in web components, it targets the wrapper of the web component, but on a regular DOM, it's just targeting the root level of the document. So HTML, if I'm right, I guess so. And I can, because it's a pseudo selector, like a colon not or a as or is or something like this in CSS, then I could pass some kind of selector inside it. So I could say if the host has the class primary, which is dependent of the variant based on the property, then I will declare not the color themselves, but the tokens dedicated to the component inside it. And just to be short on this part, this is a part of the cascading design tokens that I really love and that we covered in an episode of our design system journey with Tess a few months ago. I'm gonna have the link in the description of the video. But the idea is that you are not using the tokens directly coming from the designs into your final components. You will probably use design tokens coming from the design files that are probably raw values with not that semantic meaning in their name at all, but we are remapping every part of those design values into something more semantic for the final developers and the front-end developers working on the design system and on the final application. And the idea for that is to say, okay, I've got my application, so now I want my primary color in my application to be this color coming from the design, like color red, or another one coming from, I don't know, let me think, spacing or something like that. So I will declare different kind of value with a semantic meaning, like the primary color, the secondary color, and so on. And after that, I could also declare some kind of advanced token at the components level, saying, okay, now I have my button, and my button in its primary version is using a surface, and the button surface is mapped to the primary color coming from my application level, which is mapped to the color coming from the design file. So the tokens are cascading through your different parts of your element from the design file through the application to the tokens directly. By doing so, you will ensure that any change on the design file will finally go through the application to the component, so you don't have to change anything at all. Just changing the value of the in the design file will finally just going through the application, or you just have to switch a little value in the mapping of the token at the application level, and everything will go through the applications. So when you are using the button as a developer, working on it in a design system, you don't have to worry about, oh my God, what is the primary color? Or where should I use? When should I use the primary color? I don't know. You don't have to worry about that because you are just sandbox into the component by itself. So I'm working on the button. All that I need is to use the button color surface and the button color text, period. And you don't have to worry about what is the color, is it a primary or secondary or something like that. You don't have to care about that because the mapping is done at the component level itself, which is really powerful in terms of reusing and restyling the different tokens in different parts of your application and in different parts of your design system. So back to our example in Stencil. We mapped different kind of values to the button color surface and button color text tokens, depending of the value the primary or the of the class, so primary or secondary, which is set thanks to the property. By doing so, if the value is declared, then I could use it. If it's not, then we fall back, thanks to the CSS custom property syntax, to a default value like a neutral version, light gray and black, something like that. So if I refresh my example, so by doing so, my button is neutral and my primary button has the primary color and the secondary button has the secondary one. Well done. But, and that's interesting, what if I want to use a theme inside my application, which is, finally, I don't want to use the primary color like it was set, but I want an extension, another theme, where the primary color is not red but is blue. Let's say something like that. We could define that directly into our colors package containing the tokens. So back in the future, we declared the different kind of tokens like color red, color green, color dark, blah blah blah, and the application level tokens like a color primary, a color secondary, and so on. All those values are declared in a where.where pseudo-selector HTML selector. Why? Because this selector has no specificity at all, which means that all that set of rules have a specificity of 0, which means you will probably never override any kind of values by importing this CSS file. It's totally neutral, but it's your responsibility to probably override it when you feel that it's needed in some case, like overriding some values using a theme. So I made a simple theme blue CSS file, which contain a root selector and where I remap my color primary to blue, which could be also remapped to something like color. What do we have here? Okay, let's put color blue here, or a color purple mapped to Rebecca purple. Okay, so in my theme blue, I could use a color purple as a primary color. I need to include it in my stories like I did with a former color CSS file. And if I do so, my button primary is now purple because the values declared at the where HTML level are now overridden with a theme blue, which is not blue anymore, which is purple theme. Okay, so let's make a quick exercise that could be interesting to do. Like, okay, let's rename this file default dot, and let's fall back to SCSS for some kind of imports. So, okay, and I will make this one, we'll rename this one theme. Simple one. Okay. My idea is to set the behavior of my button to toggle the theme in my application when I click on the button, so I could live switch the different theme depending on my imports. Okay, so here is the idea. We've got something. Let me go back to another example. Okay, you know what? Let's doing it live. Let me go back to another example in the Backlight Studio. We've got a starter kit in Backlight dedicated to Sass, and thanks Misha for this starter kit. And I really do like the way this starter kit is just handling the imports inside Sass. So in my Sass example, we've got something which is tokens.isCSS, and tokens.isCSS is importing the colors.colors.scss elements. So let's do the same thing in my example. So I will add a tokens, okay, thanks Mads, SCSS file. I will import with which is a @ import, if I remember correctly. That's it. So in my token, I will import colors dot let's say index.scss file. So I could import something like this, which is okay. Oh, there is something nice. Okay, let's import colors directly. Okay, so in my colors, at the root level of my colors, Misha did it. Yeah, okay, it's a simple import, and that's all. So let's do the same thing here. At the root level of my colors package, which containing my different colors definition, let's add an index.scss file, which is a simple import to ssc colors.scss, and let's do the same thing for the theme, which is, so C like, okay, default and theme, not colors, but default and theme.scss. As a reminder, component, tokens component or button component are everyone you need into Backlight. It's just a package which contains an SSC folder and stories folder, test folder, doc folder, and you've got access to the root level of the element. So this is just a little opinionated way to see the different kind of the components as a flat tree of your different packages, containing each one containing its very own tokens, source files, different kind of components, and so on. So okay, I did so. So if I do this, I import it. If I go back here, I don't have this famous file to import right here. So I could import here in my stories preview my tokens CSS file. If I do so, okay, I've got my different values, but I'm a bit surprised because I should have my theme too, and I don't have it. So why? I import default and theme, default SCSS, theme SCSS. Okay, all coming from tokens. We're okay on this side. Let me just refresh just in case, to be sure. When in doubt, reboot. Doesn't working at all. Oh my gosh, what's that? Okay, got my import tokens. How does it work here? Let me see. We've got those different kind of versions, and in the mdgs file, where is it imported? It's imported from Is it directly into this one? No, it's not. Components. This is the imports of the different component versions, mixing and so on with a forward rule. I import breakpoints and colors, and where does this file itself is imported? In the no, sorry, it's dark layout. So if I go back to dark layout, export the template, and does it import it in the template? I don't think so. Okay, that's strange. Let me see. Ah, okay. Way better, just a bug in Firefox. It happens. So, why my button don't have these different kinds of tokens? Let's see. what do we have here? In my button, I've got access to different kinds of values, and in my HT at the document level, so in the body, I don't have any elements declared, but on the button level, I've got access to, I don't have access to anything, I guess so. Okay, my import is not working at all. That's why. No, it works because no, I don't have access to the styles. Okay, got it, got it. Okay, so input colors index.scss. Let's say something like this. Still not. Import colors SCSS. Am I right? Colors.css. Yeah, okay. In the colors package at the root level, index.scss got import to SSE default and SSE theme. Should be working, you know. Just a problem of path, but I don't know why. Don't know why it doesn't work to load. Or maybe this is just because I had to import this one. Did not. That's weird. Okay. You know what? Debugging 101. Let's see if we've got access to something like a red color in this one for the background. Okay, so this file is not imported at all. This is why. Okay, do I have something like this? No, I don't have it. Do I have something like this? Yes, okay. Yeah, so yeah, and okay, it works. Perfect. So go back to the reality. So I've got it, but my theme is still overriding everything. So I have to map my theme to something different, to select the right version of the theme regarding of properties put somewhere, like using something like a color scheme element. So let's say we've got a color scheme. We could also do something like root. Is it something like this? I guess so. If color scheme is purple, then so if on my root element, I've got an attribute named color scheme set to purple, and that this no, it's not this one. Let me just check that. Yes, yeah, it should work. Then I overwrite my different kind of values. Let's make a quick test manually by setting it directly into our elements. So on my HTML version, if I had something like attribute color scheme purple. Okay, no, my selector is not working at all. So this is it. I need to fix it here. Okay, let's remove this one just for the sake of the demo. So I've got my Sorry, I've got my primary button. Okay, so I've got my primary button, and if I set the color scheme attribute manually, color scheme purple, yeah, it works. So we can now set a simple on-click but function directly onto our stencil components. So let me go into stencil documentation to show you. Okay, so I need my directives like components, properties, reactive data, events. So I've got an event. Where I say no, it's not what I had in mind. I'm not a stencil expert, you know, so we will have to dig a bit into the documentation. So, oh, you know what? I can go to the Web Component Studio. So I can show you. Wait a second, I'm not logged on this browser. Hey, it's sometimes hard, you know. Okay, stencil. So, no, not this one. Okay. So this is a simple counter made with Stencil in the Web Component Studio. So we've got a property which will be, in our case, a simple theme, which is a Boolean, let's say false. Okay. And we're gonna have a hand click. Yes, exactly. Mapped to a method in it. So let's say the button either on click, which is a switch theme. Switch theme. Okay. Yep. So here I need a switch theme method. And in this one, okay, we can bind this. Okay. Let's do something like that. So in it, we do something like theme is toggled. So we toggle the theme, and we're gonna do this document. We're gonna do a document root element, get root node, something like that. So, and we're gonna do a set attribute. I'm not sure. Let's do something like that. Set attribute, color scheme. And if the theme is okay, then purple, otherwise null, or an empty string. Okay, so does it work if I do something like this? If I click on my button, document root element is null. Which one is this? Root element is no longer supported, and we have to use document element. That's it. Yeah, way better. So I click on it. Oh no, it doesn't work. Do I set my color scheme properly? Yeah, but I misspelled the purple. Okay, so if I go there, yeah, it works. So by clicking on the button, I switch the value of the color scheme attribute at the root level, and because thanks to the CSS cascade and the design token cascade using the CSS custom properties, then my theme is switched. So it works on my primary button, but it won't work on my secondary button because I doesn't override anything regarding the secondary version in my purple theme. So I'm just switching the theme, but we could see that clicking on any kind of button is switching properly the value. So any kind of element in my application, so in my root element, contained in my root element, are taking care of this change occurring at the root level by setting the color scheme attribute. So that's all. We've got here a button which have a theme switcher incorporated in it. We could pass a variant regarding a primary or a secondary, and we are using a set of custom properties to set the different kind of tokens in a cascade way, and we import them at our application level, which is our stories level in this very much example. That's all for everything. That's all for us. That's all for today, and I hope that I could be able to plug this small demo in a replacement of what we did with Anthony and Mike during the Stencil episode, so I would be able to publish it soon. Thank you very much for being with me. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you next week for a new episode of Coding Design System, this time dedicated to Kickstart DS with Jonas. So crossing fingers that we're gonna fix it in the meantime, and see you next Tuesday. Bye bye.